Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be continuing with the MDI and we'll be talking about what happened in the European group stages. We'll be talking about the class selections, we'll be talking about some of the gear, we'll be talking about some of the crazy strategies that came out of MDI and some of the questionable tactics as well. So first of all, a big congratulations to Shells Angels and Team PogChamps for qualifying into the next round. So big congratulations to them, and we'll be talking about the rules, because the rules play a big part in the team selection, in the tactics that the team is going to carry out, in the classes that the team is going to select. Because first of all, it's the best of three. It's the best of three double elimination rounds. So there is a new tactic, or there's a new rule that came into MDI this year, and that is class selection lock-in, basically. So in order to kind of highlight this, I'll be using the Fat Shark Yes versus Method game, where Fat Shark Yes opt in to go with 4 DPS and Method opt in to go with 2 tanks. The thing is, the first game that you have to do, or the first map and the affixes that you have to do, are locked in by Blizzard. You will know what dungeon you're going to do, but there's no choices here. If you lose the first game, the losing team will get to choose a map out of a pool of dungeons that are available, and they get to choose the third affix. The first 2 affixes are kind of locked in. So this kind of means a lot, because for those 3 games, or possibly 2 games if you win both games straight away, you have to select 5 classes. And those classes cannot be altered. If you select a paladin, you can play a red, you can play a protection, you can play a holy. But in the example here, Fat Shark Yes went with 4 DPS, and you can see that there's a Retribution Paladin there. And Retribution Paladin is there because, not because red is so overpowered, like they probably would prefer to go with the Windwalker Monk because Windwalker has been so strong, but they have to go with Retribution Paladin because in the second game, they want that specific player to play Holy Paladin. And because they have to lock in 5 classes before the games, they have to go with the different specs rather than classes. So that caused a lot of controversy, because there's a specific map, Blackrock Hold, BRH, which I'll talk about later on, which caused a lot of controversy in terms of class selection. So first of all, let's look at the teams, let's look at the best classes for at least the European MDI. And the European teams chose these classes, or they preferred them, because it's not unfair for me to say that Europeans love the melee cleave. They went with a lot of melee classes. I mean, probably the most favorite, or what the Europeans deemed to be the best classes for utility for DPS, were Havoc Demon Hunter, Windwalker Monk, Subtlety Rogue, Blood Decay, and Holy Paladin. That 5 class combo, or 5 spec combo, was insanely strong. A lot of teams would go with that. So that's like 5 melee classes, basically. Holy Paladins are referred to as melee anyways. So you have to consider that this was chosen by a lot of teams, but there were alterations. If we look at the tanks, Blood Decays were there for 100% of the time. No alterations there. Holy Paladin was there basically for 99%. There was 1 Resto Druid who was being used. I think one of the Resto Druids was actually being used by Shells Angels in round 2. And that was the only time we actually saw a Resto Druid, which was a bit crazy. Holy Paladins were extremely powerful. I mean, you have to keep in mind that it's 970 gear. You have to keep in mind that you can choose tier 20 and tier 21. And when Holy Paladins opted in to do crazy healing, because Holy Paladins or healers have to do DPS, you have to remember that. But when they really wanted to do some crazy healing, they go with tier 24 set, tier 21 2 set. You have to remember, tier 24 set is incredibly powerful for Holy Paladins in 5-man dungeons. So it kind of brought them up even, they made them even more powerful on top of the crazy utility and survivability and things like that. And then you saw, like I mentioned, the 3 melees, Windwalker Monks, Havoc Demon Hunters, and Subtlety Rogues. Now, they were not always chosen. There was some Affliction Warlocks being dropped in some of the matches. There were also 1 Boomkin, or a Balanced Druid, who actually did really well, and it was but everyone was like, whoa, Boomkin, you're going a Boomkin, you're not going the 3 melee, that's crazy, what are you doing? It was kind of a surprise. It was definitely a surprise. But you saw Affliction Warlocks, you saw Boomkins, and then you saw Mages. and then you saw mages. And this was interesting in so many different ways. And why am I gonna say this? Because, like I mentioned, you have to pick in 5 classes. So if you opt in to go with the mage, you'll be with the mage for the 3 games, or the 2 games if you win 2 games straight away. But BRH, Blackrock Hold, has a specific little smart tactic, exploit, whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it. So there's a mob called Risen Arcanist. Risen Arcanist casts Arcane Blitz. And when Risen Arcanist casts this Arcane Blitz, Risen Arcanist gets a buff on himself that increases damage by 50% for 10 seconds. And that buff stacks. Risen Arcanist is undead and can be controlled by a DK, like a blood DK. So what happens is that a blood DK controls this mob for the whole dungeon and basically releases this mob once in a while. If there's a big trash ball or if there's a boss fight, they release this mob. This mob will cast this Arcane Blitz on the blood DK. It'll cast it, the mob will get this buff. And what happens then? An Arcane Mage will spell steal this. Will spell steal this buff. Will be like 150, 200, 200. It depends how much of the buff the Risen Arcanist got, or how many casts they got off. But after that, Arcane Mage will just destroy bosses, mobs. Like, we're talking millions, billions, like crazy amount of damage in a couple of seconds. And this tactic has proven to be super, super overpowered in Blackrock Hold. It basically meant that if you have a mage, and if you get a mage, it'll swap to Arcane Spec, and if that mage will get this buff off properly, there's no way of losing this dungeon unless you really, really mess up. And we saw this happen. Some of the teams who picked up an Arcane Mage, they died to boulders, they died to stupid things, and they actually end up losing some of the matches. But if the team plays this tactic perfectly, with no mistakes, there is absolutely no way the opposing team, who does not have a mage, can beat them. There's no way. There's no way that can happen. The damage is just too much. So what you saw in this competition was that if you know the first dungeon is BRH, or if your team opts in to go with a mage, they will, let's say, they will do the first dungeon. Let's say it's more souls. They do a first dungeon with the fire mage. Fire mage deals a lot of damage, but at the same time, that composition or that team would be like, maybe we should have brought Windwalker Monk. Windwalker Monk would probably provide more DPS and utility and things like that, but we have a fire mage. Because if you lose that, let's say, more souls, as a losing team, you get to pick the next dungeon. And what dungeon are you going to pick? You're going to pick BRH. And especially if you know that your opposing team does not have a mage in their composition, they cannot swap in and get a fire mage or get an arcane mage for BRH. They cannot do that because, again, like I mentioned, they're locked in with the 5 classes. So that mage composition will get a free game. It's basically a free game. They'll go into BRH, they'll get this Risen Arcanist, they'll get the buffs, they'll do billion damage, they'll beat the dungeon by like 5 minutes or something, 5 or 10 minutes. Like, the opposing team will just basically have no way of catching up unless you really, really mess up. So this tactic actually was used by quite a few teams. It was quite successful. I do have to mention that a couple of teams did use this, and they actually ended up losing against teams that did not have an arcane mage. So it's not always foolproof, but it is a tactic that was used very, very often in this competition. I've heard that in the next stage that they might be banning BRH, or BRH is not going to be in the dungeon pool where you can choose the dungeons. I'm not completely sure yet, but I think Blizzard has caught on to this and they might not like this. I really want to know your thoughts about this specific tactic. I really, really want to know your thoughts about this specific tactic, whether you like it or whether you don't. I really want to know about your thoughts about the composition of the melee heavy composition. Havoc Demon Hunter, Windwalker Monk, Subtlety Rogue. I mean, I mentioned these 3 classes. The fact is that Windwalkers were dominant. Windwalkers were extremely dominant. There were triple Windwalkers. There were double Windwalkers. I mean, there was Windwalker in every single team almost. And you have to, like, they were so prevalent. There were so many of them that it kind of caused this meme going around that Windwalkers die easily. And it's kind of true because we saw a lot of Windwalker deaths in the dungeons overall. And if there were statistics for the most deaths, Windwalkers would probably be the ones that top those charts. Purely because a lot of people were saying because maybe the players who are playing triple Windwalker, they're not used to playing Windwalker. Windwalker is not their main class. And also it also caused people to ask, do Windwalkers have a really good personal cooldowns, or like in terms of like survivability? They can't really compare to rogues. So there was a meme happening of Windwalkers dying all the time. Again, it's up to you to decide whether it's the player error or the actual class design in terms of damage reduction, in terms of personal survivability. But it was interesting to see that playstyle and interesting to see that many deaths. Now, in terms of hacks, or in terms of glitches that happened, there were quite a few glitches. And I've been looking into the glitches, whether they were intentionally caused. There was a lot of people talking about intentionally caused glitches. I don't feel there were that many teams who would try and do intentional glitches in this competition, but I've also uncovered that there's been reports, and there's been multiple reports about the observer or the cameraman who basically follows the people around in a dungeon, who's basically just an invisible character apparently, has been caused a lot of glitches before, and a lot of people have linked in this observer into glitches that have been happening in the European tournament, because basically what happens, this cameraman sometimes can get into combat with mobs, and those mobs will try and target this invisible cameraman, and they'll glitch out, they'll evade. There's been reports as well that this happened before previously, and it kept certain teams in combat for the whole duration of the dungeon basically, and they had to remake it. So I don't know, this is not official, but I've seen a lot of people saying this. I'm not sure if this is true. Like, if this is true, this definitely is a cause for concern, and it's definitely something that Blizzard should work on. Like, they should really create a better cameraman or way to spectate a dungeon without causing these kind of issues. It'll be interesting to see if there's going to be less glitches in the future, because there's been a lot of talk about glitches and remakes in this European tournament, more than any other one. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know how you feel about the classes, how you feel about the glitches, how you feel about these tactics. Let me know if you want to get more of these MDI videos. Thank you for watching this guide. If you like the content, please do subscribe, like, and all of that. It really does help out the channel a lot, believe me. Thank you for your support, guys, and I'll see you in my next video.